The warning sirens screamed across Earth's surface as massive shapes appeared in the sky above major cities. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the military ship Vengeance, watching through the main screen as alien vessels emerged from empty space. Each ship was the size of a small moon, black and twisted like something that had crawled out of a nightmare. "Sir, we're getting readings from 17 different locations," said Lieutenant Amy Carter, her voice shaking as she stared at her control panel. "They're huge. Bigger than anything we've ever seen." Jake had been a ship commander for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien ships looked alive somehow, pulsing with a dark red light that made his skin crawl. He could see similar vessels hanging over New York, Tokyo, London, and every other major human city. "Get me Admiral Kane," Jake ordered, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Tell him the reports were true." "They're here." For 6 months, human scouts had been sending back disturbing news from the outer colonies. Entire worlds had gone silent. When rescue ships arrived, they found nothing but empty planets stripped of all life. The few survivors who escaped told impossible stories about creatures that fed on fear and pain. The stories all mentioned the same name, the Vorthek Collective. They were said to be the perfect killers, a race that had evolved beyond normal hunting. They didn't just kill for food or territory. They killed because they enjoyed the process of breaking other creatures, of watching hope die in their victims' eyes. Amy's console beeped with an incoming message. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead alien ship. It's not coming through our normal channels. It's going straight into our heads." Jake felt it before she finished speaking. A cold presence pushed into his mind, carrying words that weren't spoken but somehow understood. The voice was like ice water in his veins. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, echoing inside every human mind on the planet. "We are the Vorthek Collective. We have traveled far to reach your world. We have consumed the life force of 47 species across this galaxy. Your time has come." The mental voice paused, and Jake could feel something like cruel amusement in the silence. "We offer you a choice," the voice continued. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Resist us, and we will show you suffering beyond your imagination. We will break your minds before we break your bodies. We will make you beg for death while keeping you alive for centuries." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was pale and shaking. Some of the younger officers were crying. The alien voice had carried with it images of what happened to those who resisted. Entire populations tortured not for information or compliance, but for the pure joy the Vorthak took in inflicting pain. "You have 72 hours to decide," the voice said. "Choose wisely." The presence left their minds, leaving behind a cold emptiness that felt almost as bad as the invasion itself, 3,000 miles away. In a concrete bunker beneath the Pentagon, Admiral Peter Kane sat in an emergency meeting with Earth's military leaders. The room was filled with the most powerful people in human space, but they all looked like frightened children. General Lisa Brooks, the head of Earth's ground forces, was reading reports from the outer colonies. "The pattern is always the same," she said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "They arrive, they give the ultimatum, and then they land. The lucky ones die in the first wave, the others ... She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the room had seen the recordings from the few survivors who made it back to human space. The Vorthak didn't just kill, they studied their victims, learning exactly how much pain each species could endure before breaking. Then they would keep them alive at that exact point for as long as possible. Colonel Ryan Murphy, Earth's intelligence chief, pulled up a holographic display showing the alien ships. "We've counted 200 vessels in orbit. Each one is capable of carrying millions of troops. Our entire military couldn't handle even one of those ships." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of human xenobiology, had been studying the few Vorthak corpses recovered from previous battles. "They're not just physically superior to us," she said quietly. "They've evolved specifically to be killers. Their brains are wired to feel pleasure from causing suffering. It's not cruelty to them, it's as natural as breathing." Kane listened to the reports but said nothing. Around the table, the other leaders were already talking about surrender terms. They wanted to know if the Vorthek might spare some humans as slaves, or if there was any way to negotiate for more time, but Kane wasn't thinking about surrender. He was thinking about a conversation he'd had 6 months ago with Dr. Marcus Webb, a researcher working on a project so secret that most of the people in this room didn't know it existed. "Sir," General Brooks said, noticing Kane's silence, "we need to make a decision. The Vorthak have never been defeated. Every species that has tried to fight them has been wiped out. Maybe if we surrender quickly, some of us might survive." Kane finally looked up. His eyes were cold and calculating in a way that made several people in the room step back. "No," he said simply. "Sir, with respect, we don't have a choice," Colonel Murphy said. "They have us completely outgunned. Our weapons can barely scratch their ships. Their troops can rip through our best soldiers like paper." Kane stood up slowly. "You're all thinking like the other species they've conquered. You're thinking about this like a normal war. But this isn't a normal war." He walked to the display showing the alien ships. "The Vorthak have made one mistake. They assume we're like everyone else they've faced. They think they're the ultimate predators, the most dangerous killers in the galaxy." Kane turned back to face the room. "They've never met humans before." Dr. Vasquez frowned. "Sir, I don't understand. My research shows that humans are actually less physically capable than most of the species the Vorthak have conquered. We're weaker, slower, and we don't have any natural weapons." "That's not what makes us dangerous," Kane said. "What makes us dangerous is something else entirely, something that other species don't have." He walked back to his seat but didn't sit down. "The Vorthek think they're the most creative killers in the galaxy. They think they've perfected the art of causing suffering, but they've never studied human history." The room was quiet now, everyone waiting for Kane to continue. "Every species they've conquered has been relatively peaceful," Kane said. "They evolved past their killer instincts or never developed them in the first place. But humans are different. We've been killing each other in increasingly creative ways for thousands of years. We've turned murder into an art form." General Brooks looked uncomfortable. "Sir, are you suggesting we try to outcruel the Vorthak?" Kane smiled, and it was a cold, frightening expression. "I'm suggesting we show them what real monsters look like. The Vorthak think they're the ultimate predators. They're about to learn that humans have been perfecting the art of being monsters long before they ever left their homeworld." He pressed a button on the table, and the display changed to show a classified file labeled Project Pandora. 72 hours, Kane said. "That's how long we have to wake up the parts of humanity that we've spent centuries trying to keep buried." The Vorthak arrived with hell. But they're about to discover that humans have been living in hell for generations, and some of us have learned to call it home. The meeting ended in silence. As the leaders filed out, each one carrying orders they hoped they would never have to follow, Kane remained behind. He stared at the display showing the alien ships hanging over Earth like a death sentence. The Vorthak had made their choice when they decided to threaten humanity. Now Kane was going to make his. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when one species of monsters met another. And Kane was betting that his monsters were worse. Dr. Marcus Webb had not seen sunlight in 15 years. 3 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, in a facility so secret that it didn't appear on any government records, he had spent his entire career studying humanity's darkest secrets. The elevator that brought Admiral Kane down to level 7 took 20 minutes to complete its descent. The walls grew thicker with each level, designed to contain something far more dangerous than nuclear weapons or biological agents. They were designed to contain knowledge that could destroy civilization itself. Kane stepped out of the elevator into a sterile, white hallway lined with doors marked only with numbers. Each door led to a different aspect of Project Pandora, but Webb's office was at the very end of the corridor. As they walked, Kane's security detail grew more nervous with each step. Captain Tony Martinez, Kane's personal aide, had been briefed on many classified projects during his career, But nothing had prepared him for what he saw when Webb opened his office door. The walls were covered with photographs, brain scans, and psychological profiles. Every image showed a human face, but there was something wrong with each one. The eyes were empty, cold, predatory. "Admiral Kane," Webb said, adjusting his thick glasses, "I've been expecting you. The Vorthik arrival has been projected for months." Webb was a thin man in his 60s, with gray hair and pale skin that came from decades of living underground. But his eyes were sharp and intelligent, and when he looked at the photographs on his walls, there was something almost like admiration in his expression. "Doctor, I need to know if your research can help us," Kane said. "The Vorthik think they're the ultimate killers. Can we prove them wrong?" Webb smiled, and Martinez felt his skin crawl. "Admiral, let me show you something that will change how you think about our species forever." He led them to a computer terminal and pulled up a series of brain scans. "These are the neural patterns of what we call apex predators, not lions or sharks, but humans. Specifically, humans who have killed other humans not for survival, food, or territory, but for pleasure." The scans showed brains that were different from normal humans. Certain areas lit up in patterns that Webb explained indicated a complete lack of empathy, combined with heightened pleasure responses to violence and suffering. "For the past 15 years, I've been studying every serial killer, war criminal, and sociopath in human history," Webb continued. "What I discovered is that these individuals aren't aberrations, they're evolution in action. They represent what humans can become when all moral restraints are removed." Kane studied the scans. "How many people like this exist?" "More than you might think, fewer than you might fear," Webb replied. "Perhaps 1 in every 10,000 humans carries the genetic markers for this type of personality. Most never act on it because of social conditioning and legal consequences, but given the right circumstances." He pulled up another display showing crime statistics from human colonies during wartime. The numbers were staggering. In situations where normal social controls broke down, ordinary humans had committed acts of cruelty that rivaled anything in the historical records. Martinez was reading over a file that had been left open on Webb's desk. It contained the biography of a woman named Sally Kim, a former scientist who had conducted experiments on living subjects. The descriptions of her work made him physically sick. "These people are monsters," Martinez said, pushing the file away. "No," Webb said calmly, "these people are tools. The question is whether we're desperate enough to use them." He led them to another room filled with video monitors. Each screen showed footage from various human conflicts throughout history. But these weren't battles or military actions. They were recordings of what humans did to other humans when they believed no one was watching. "The Vorthak pride themselves on being creative killers," Webb said, pointing to one screen that showed a human interrogation technique that was too disturbing for Martinez to watch. "But they're amateurs compared to what humans have developed over thousands of years of warfare." Kane watched the screens without flinching. "Can these people be controlled?" "That's the beautiful part," Webb said. "They don't need to be controlled, they need to be aimed. Give them a target and a purpose, and they'll exceed your expectations in ways that will terrify you." He pulled up another set of files, these ones containing psychological profiles. "I've identified 237 individuals currently in maximum security facilities across human space. Each one has been convicted of crimes so heinous that they've been sentenced to permanent isolation. The profiles made for disturbing reading. There was Danny Rodriguez, a corporate executive who had tortured and killed hundreds of colonists simply because he enjoyed their screams. There was Sally Kim, who had created designer diseases that killed children in specific, agonizing ways because she found their suffering artistically interesting. These people have been isolated because they're too dangerous for normal society," Webb continued. "But against the Vorthak, they might be exactly what we need." Kane walked to a window that looked out over another level of the facility. Below, he could see technicians working with alien specimens, pieces of Vorthak technology and biology that had been recovered from previous encounters. "What's down there?" he asked, Testing, Webb said simply. We've had Vorthek prisoners for 6 months. We've been studying them, learning their psychology, their fears, their weaknesses. He led them to an elevator that took them down one more level. This area was different from the clinical research floors above. The walls were thicker, the lighting was dimmer, and there was a smell in the air that Martinez couldn't identify. They stopped outside a reinforced observation window. Inside the room beyond, Martinez could see something that would give him nightmares for the rest of his life. A Vorthek warrior was strapped to a metal table. The alien was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with gray skin and rows of sharp teeth. It had been built by evolution to be the perfect killer, a creature that felt no fear and showed no mercy, but now it was screaming. Standing next to the table was a human woman in a white coat. She was working methodically, using tools that Martinez didn't recognize, and she was humming quietly to herself as she worked. The Vorthek, this creature that had conquered dozens of worlds and killed millions of beings, was begging for death. In its own language. That's Dr. Kim, Webb said quietly. She's been working with our Vorthek specimens for 3 months. She's learned more about their psychology than our entire xenobiology department. Kane watched through the window as Kim made notes on a tablet, completely ignoring the alien's pleas. What has she discovered? The Vorthek think they're immune to fear because they've always been the apex predators, Webb replied. But they've never encountered anything worse than themselves. Dr. Kim has been teaching them what real feels like. The woman in the room looked up at the observation window and waved cheerfully. Her smile was warm and friendly, the kind of expression you might see on a kindergarten teacher. But her eyes were completely empty. The Vorthek have given us 72 hours, Kane said. Can your people be ready by then? Webb nodded. They've been ready for months, Admiral. The question is whether you're ready for what they'll do when you unleash them. Kane turned away from the window. Doctor, the Vorthek have killed billions of innocent people across the galaxy. They're planning to torture and murder every human alive. Do you really think I care about moral considerations at this point? I'm not concerned about morality, Admiral, Webb said. I'm concerned about control. Once we let these individuals off their leashes, once we give them permission to be what they really are, there may be no putting them back. Kane was quiet for a long moment, watching as Dr. Kim continued her work on the screaming alien. The Vorthek came here expecting to find another helpless species to add to their collection. They think they understand what fear and suffering look like. He turned to face Webb. It's time to show them what those things actually mean. Activate Project Pandora. I want every individual in your files awakened and briefed within 48 hours. As they rode the elevator back to the surface, Martinez finally found his voice. Sir, are we sure about this? Those people down there, they're not soldiers, they're criminals, murderers. Kane looked at him with eyes that had gone cold and distant. Captain, the Vorthek brought hell to our doorstep. They want to show us what monsters look like. But they made one mistake. They assumed they were the worst things in the universe. The elevator reached the surface, and Kane stepped out into the sunlight. Above them, the Vorthek ship still hung in the sky like a death sentence. They're about to learn that humans have been living with real monsters for thousands of years, Kane said, and now we're going to introduce them. The prison transport ship arrived at Titan Station in the early morning hours. Colonel Ryan Murphy stood on the docking platform, watching as the heavily armored shuttle landed with a hiss of steam and hydraulics. Inside that shuttle were some of the most dangerous human beings ever born, and he was about to ask them to save humanity. Titan Station orbited Saturn and served as the maximum security prison for the worst criminals in human space. Most people didn't even know it existed. The prisoners held here had committed crimes so terrible that the government had decided they could never be released, never be rehabilitated, and never be spoken of again. Murphy's security team was nervous. Each guard carried weapons designed to stop the most dangerous humans alive, and they all knew that what they were about to do violated every safety protocol ever written. But Admiral Kane's orders had been clear: recruit the monsters or watch. Humanity died as the shuttle doors opened with a mechanical clank. The first person to step out was a small woman with dark hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother, the kind of person who might bake cookies for neighborhood children. Her name was Sally Kim, and she had killed over 400 people in the most creative ways possible. "Colonel Murphy," she said with a warm smile, as if they were old friends meeting for lunch. "I'm so excited to be here. Dr. Webb has told me wonderful things about this project." Behind her came Danny Rodriguez, a tall man with graying hair and the kind of face that belonged in a corporate boardroom. He had once been the CEO of a major colony development company. He had also personally tortured 300 colonists to death because he enjoyed the sound they made when they begged for mercy. "This is quite an honor," Rodriguez said, looking around at the military personnel with genuine pleasure. "It's been so long since I've had the chance to practice my skills on new subjects." Murphy felt his stomach turn. These people spoke about murder and torture the way normal humans discuss the weather. But according to Dr. Webb's files, they were exactly what humanity needed to fight the Vorthik. The shuttle held 12 prisoners in total, each one selected for their specific abilities. There was Frank Butler, who had developed new forms of psychological torture that could break a person's mind in hours. There was Linda Cross, who had created biological weapons designed to cause maximum suffering before death. Each one was a specialist in some form of human cruelty. They were transported to a secure facility on Earth's moon, where Dr. Elena Vasquez waited with a team of military psychologists. The facility had been built specifically for Project Pandora, with holding cells that could contain the most dangerous individuals humanity had ever produced. "Welcome to Lunar Base 7, Dr. Vasquez said as the prisoners were led into a briefing room. "You're here because humanity faces an enemy unlike anything we've ever encountered. The Vorthik Collective has given us an ultimatum: surrender or face extinction." She activated a holographic display showing the alien ships in orbit around Earth. The prisoners watched with interest, but showed no signs of fear. If anything, they seemed curious about their potential new playmates. "The Vorthik consider themselves the ultimate predators," Vasquez continued. "They've conquered 47 different species by breaking their will through torture and psychological warfare. They believe no species in the galaxy can match their capacity for cruelty." Sally Kim raised her hand like a student in a classroom. "Dr. Vasquez, have you had the chance to study their pain responses? I'd love to know how their nervous systems compare to human ones." "That's exactly why you're here," Vasquez replied. "We have Vorthik prisoners, and we need you to find their weaknesses. We need you to discover what scares them, what breaks them, what makes them suffer." Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "What are the legal parameters for our work? Are there any restrictions on what we can do to these aliens?" Murphy spoke up from the back of the room. "There are no restrictions. The Vorthak have declared war on humanity. They've promised to torture every human alive. Whatever you do to them, consider it a military operation." The prisoners exchanged glances, and Murphy saw something pass between them that made his blood run cold. They weren't just interested in this project. They were excited about it in a way that reminded him why these people had been locked away in the first place. "When do we start?" asked Linda Cross, a woman whose biological weapons had wiped out entire colonies in ways that normal viruses never could. "Immediately," Vasquez said. "We have 48 hours before the Vorthak deadline expires. We need to learn everything we can about their psychology, their fears, and their weaknesses." The prisoners were escorted to individual laboratories, each one equipped with Vorthik specimens and all the tools they might need for their work. Murphy watched through security monitors as they began their research, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. Sally Kim approached her Vorthak subject with the same careful attention she might give to a complicated recipe. The alien warrior was 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor that had evolved over millions of years. It had killed thousands of beings across the galaxy and had never shown fear or mercy, but within an hour of beginning her work, Kim had reduced it to a whimpering, broken creature that begged for death in its own language. "Fascinating," she said into her recording device. completely ignoring the aliens' pleas. Their pain receptors are actually more sensitive than human ones, and their psychological makeup is surprisingly fragile once you understand the right pressure points. In another room, Rodriguez was taking a different approach. He had spent the first hour simply talking to his subject, learning about Vorthic society and culture. Now he was applying that knowledge in ways that made the alien warrior shake with terror. You see, Rodriguez explained to the creature, humans have been perfecting the art of psychological warfare for thousands of years. We don't just hurt people. We destroy their sense of self, their hope, their will to live. The Vorthic tried to maintain its dignity, but Rodriguez had already identified its deepest fears. He began describing what human forces would do to the aliens' family back on their homeworld, painting pictures of suffering so detailed and creative that the warrior began to scream. Frank Butler had developed a completely different technique. He was using a combination of drugs and psychological manipulation to reprogram his subject's mind. The Vorthic warrior that had entered his laboratory as a confident predator was now convinced that every shadow contained human monsters waiting to tear it apart. The key is understanding that fear is learned, Butler explained to Dr. Vasquez during one of her visits. These creatures have never experienced true helplessness. Once you teach them what it feels like, they become much more manageable. Linda Cross had taken a biological approach. She was studying the Vorthac's immune system and developing viruses specifically designed to cause maximum pain while keeping the subject alive and conscious. Her work was precise and methodical, like a surgeon performing an operation. Their biology is actually quite similar to ours in some ways, she told Murphy during a progress report, which means that many of my previous creations can be adapted for use against them. I'm particularly excited about a strain that attacks the nervous system while leaving the brain completely functional. By the end of the first day, the Vorthac prisoners were no longer the confident predators they had been when they arrived. They cowered in their cells, flinching at every sound, begging their guards for protection from the humans who had been studying them. Murphy found himself in Dr. Webb's office, staring at security footage of the laboratories. These people aren't just torturing the aliens, he said. They're enjoying it. They're getting better at it. Webb nodded calmly. That's exactly what we hoped would happen. The Vorthac think they understand suffering, but they've never encountered anything like human creativity applied to the art of causing pain. But what happens when this is over? Murphy asked. What do we do with these people when the war ends? Webb was quiet for a long moment. Colonel, I don't think you understand what we've done here. We haven't just recruited soldiers for this war. We've created something new. These individuals have tasted alien blood, and they've discovered that humans can be more creative and more vicious than anything else in the galaxy. He turned to face Murphy directly. The question isn't what we do with them when the war ends. The question is whether the war will ever really end. Because once the galaxy sees what we're capable of, I don't think anyone will ever feel safe again. Outside the lunar facility, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, surrounded by the dark shapes of Vorthac ships. But inside the laboratories, humanity's worst nightmares were learning to become something even more terrible. The countdown to the alien ultimatum continued, but the prisoners were no longer concerned about the deadline. They were too busy perfecting their art. The 72-hour deadline expired at exactly noon, Earth Standard Time. Across the planet, people huddled in their homes and shelters, waiting for the alien ships to begin their attack. But instead of death rays or invasion forces, something else descended from the Vorthic fleet. Captain Steve Johnson stood on the bridge of the modified freighter Nightmare, watching as the first wave of Vorthic psychological warfare hit Earth's communication networks. The aliens were broadcasting directly into human minds, showing images of what they had done to other species. The messages were designed to break human will before the actual invasion began, but Johnson wasn't watching the alien broadcasts. He was watching his own crew prepare their response. The Nightmare had been converted into a mobile psychological warfare platform, and every person on board was a graduate of Project Pandora. They had spent 2 days learning everything they could. about Vortex psychology, and now they were ready to put that knowledge to use. Sally, are you ready with the first transmission? Johnson asked. Dr. Sally Kim looked up from her console with the same warm smile she had worn when torturing Vorthek prisoners. Oh yes, Captain. I think our new friends are going to find this very educational. She activated the ship's communication array, which had been modified to broadcast on the same psychic frequencies the Vorthak used. But instead of images of human suffering, Kim began transmitting something else entirely. Her voice cut through the alien communications like a knife through silk. She spoke in perfect Vorthak language, which she had learned by studying their prisoners. But more importantly, she spoke with the calm, clinical tone of someone describing a favorite hobby. "Hello, Vorthak warriors," Kim said, her words reaching every alien ship in the fleet. "My name is Sally Kim, and I want to tell you about some of the projects I've been working on. I've been studying your people for 2 days now, and I've learned so many interesting things about your biology." She paused, and Johnson could see the alien ships beginning to alter their flight patterns. The Vorthak commanders were trying to block the transmission, but Kim's signal was too strong and too precisely targeted. For example, Kim continued, "Did you know that your nervous system processes pain differently than ours? It's actually much more efficient, which means that techniques that would kill a human in hours can keep a Vorthak alive and conscious for weeks." Johnson watched his monitors as the alien fleet's formation began to break apart. Some ships were changing course entirely, while others seemed to be having internal communication problems. "I've been developing some new biological agents specifically for your species," Kim went on, still using that cheerful conversational tone. "They're really quite elegant. They attack your pain receptors first, making everything hurt more. Then they move to your nervous system, but they're very careful not to damage anything important. We want to keep you alive for as long as possible." In another part of the ship, Danny Rodriguez was preparing his own transmission. He had spent his time studying Vorthak social structures and family bonds. Now he was ready to use that knowledge as a weapon. "Attention Vorthak fleet," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding corporate boardrooms. "This is Danny Rodriguez, representing Earth's Strategic Response Division. I want to discuss your families." The effect was immediate. Vorthak communications traffic spiked as the aliens began frantically trying to contact their homeworlds. Rodriguez had hit them where they were most vulnerable. "While you've been traveling to Earth, human strike teams have been preparing to visit your homeworlds," Rodriguez continued. "We've learned so much about your culture from your captured warriors. We know where your families live. We know how your children are raised. We know what they fear most." Rodriguez activated a display showing detailed maps of Vorthak colonies, information that had been extracted from their prisoners through methods that no human court would ever have approved. "Your children have never experienced real fear, have they?" Rodriguez asked, his voice taking on a tone of false sympathy. "They've grown up safe and protected, knowing that their parents are the ultimate predators in the galaxy, but they're about to learn what it feels like to be prey." Johnson could see panic spreading through the alien fleet. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for the entire journey to Earth were now breaking ranks, some heading back toward the hyperspace jump points. Frank Butler took over the next transmission. His specialty was psychological manipulation, and he had developed new techniques specifically for breaking Vorthak minds. "Vorthak warriors," Butler said, his voice carrying an undertone that seemed to bypass conscious thought and speak directly. "Two primitive fears. You came here expecting to find helpless prey, but you've made a terrible mistake. You've awakened something that has been sleeping in human space for generations." Butler's transmission included subliminal elements that he had developed while studying the alien prisoners, sounds and frequencies that triggered panic responses in Vorthak brains. "Humans have been perfecting the art of psychological warfare for thousands of years," Butler continued. "We've learned how to break minds, how to destroy hope, how to make death seem like mercy, and now we're going to teach you." The alien fleet was in chaos now. Several ships had already jumped back to hyperspace, fleeing without firing a shot. The remaining vessels were struggling to maintain communication as their crews descended into panic. But the Project Pandora team wasn't finished. Linda cross-activated her own transmission, broadcasting information about the biological weapons she had developed for use against Vorthak physiology. "I've created over 200 different viruses specifically designed for your species," Cross said with scientific precision. "Each one is more creative than the last. Some attack your ability to feel pleasure while enhancing pain. Others slowly dissolve your nervous system while keeping your brain fully functional." She displayed molecular diagrams that the Vorthak scientists would recognize and understand. Each diagram showed a pathogen specifically engineered to cause maximum suffering while preventing death. "The beautiful thing about biological warfare," Cross continued, "is that it spreads. One infected Vorthak can carry these gifts back to their entire population. Your homeworlds, your families, your children, they'll all have the chance to experience human creativity firsthand." Johnson watched as more ships fled the battle zone. Of the 200 vessels that had arrived at Earth, fewer than 50 remained. And those that stayed were no longer the confident predators that had delivered the original ultimatum. The Vorthak fleet commander finally responded, his mental voice filled with something no Vorthak had ever experienced before: genuine terror. "Humans," the alien said, his thoughts reaching every mind on Earth, We withdraw our ultimatum. We will leave your system and never return." But Sally Kim wasn't finished with her broadcast. "Oh, but you can't leave now," she said with mock disappointment. "We're just getting started. We have so much to show you about human nature." Rodriguez took over the transmission. "You see, you made this personal when you threatened our families. Now we're going to make it personal for you. Every Vorthak world, every colony, every outpost, we're going to visit them all." The alien commander tried to negotiate. "We will leave immediately. We will never threaten human space again. Please allow us to depart in peace." Frank Butler laughed, and the sound was transmitted across all frequencies. "Peace? You came here, planning to torture every human alive. You wanted to show us what suffering looked like. Did you really think we would just let you leave when you got scared?" Johnson could see the remaining Vorthak ships beginning to flee, but it was too late. Human military vessels were already moving to intercept them. The battle plan hadn't been to defend Earth. It had been to ensure that some Vorthak escaped to spread word of what they had encountered. "Let some of them go," Johnson ordered his tactical officer. "We want survivors to carry the message back to their people." Linda Cross made the final transmission. "To any Vorthak listening to this message, you are no longer the apex predators in this galaxy. Humans have held that title for thousands of years, and now the rest of the universe is going to learn why." As the alien fleet scattered and fled, Johnson looked around at his crew. The Project Pandora volunteers were celebrating, but there was something wrong with their joy. They weren't happy about saving Earth. They were excited about the hunt that was about to begin. "Captain," Sally Kim said, her eyes bright with anticipation, "when do we start pursuing them? I have so many ideas for improving on what we've learned." Johnson realized that Admiral Kane had been right about one thing: the war was over before it had really begun. But he was beginning to understand that Kane might have been wrong about being able to control what they had unleashed. The Vorthak had arrived with hell, expecting to break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had awakened something that made their own cruelty seem almost innocent by comparison. And now that something was hungry for new worlds to explore and new species to study. 3 years had passed since the Vorthak fled from Earth's orbit. What followed was not the peace that humanity had hoped for, but something far more terrifying. The galaxy was learning what happened when humans decided to become the hunters. Instead of the hunted, Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution, as it emerged from hyperspace near the former Vorthak colony of Zarian Prime. Around him, a fleet of human ships materialized from the darkness, each one crewed by volunteers from Project Pandora and military personnel who had learned to embrace humanity's darker nature The planet below had once been home to 50 million Vorthak civilians. Now it was silent and dark, its cities empty, its orbital stations abandoned. The few life signs their sensors detected were faint and scattered, the remnants of a population that had learned what true fear meant. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." "From the surface," reported Lieutenant Beth Garcia, one of the few normal military officers left on Morrison's crew. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. Over the past 3 years, she had watched her fellow humans become something that frightened her more than any alien threat. "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was barely recognizable as Vorthek. It was broken, pleading, filled with a desperation that would have been impossible for the proud warrior race just a few years earlier. "Please," the alien voice said in broken human language, "please stop. We surrender, we will give you anything you want. Our technology, our resources, our knowledge, just please make them stop." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the human. "Flee." Each ship was equipped with weapons and techniques that the Project Pandora volunteers had developed over 3 years of hunting Vorthak survivors across the galaxy. They had become very good at their work. "Dr. Kim," Morrison said, turning to a small woman who stood beside his command chair, "are you satisfied with the results here?" Sally Kim smiled, that same warm grandmother smile that had once seemed so innocent. But now it made even hardened soldiers look away. "Oh, not quite yet, Captain. I still have a few experiments I'd like to complete. The children here have such interesting neural development patterns," Morrison nodded. Over the past 3 years, Kim had become the unofficial leader of the Project Pandora volunteers. Her research into alien psychology had helped human forces break the will of 17 different species. The methods she used were so effective that entire star systems surrendered without firing a shot rather than face what she might do to their populations. "Danny, what's the status of the other operations?" Morrison asked. Danny Rodriguez looked up from his communication console. He had been coordinating human activities across 12 star systems, managing the psychological warfare campaigns that were bringing the galaxy to its knees. "The Altarian Confederation surrendered this morning," Rodriguez reported with satisfaction. "The Crystalline Republic is asking for terms, and the Zephyrian Empire has agreed to become a human protectorate rather than face direct intervention." Rodriguez had become a master of what the humans called reputation warfare. He didn't need to actually visit most worlds anymore. The stories of what Project Pandora volunteers had done to the Vorthek were enough to make entire civilizations submit to human authority. "Excellent," Morrison said. "Dr. Cross, how are your biological projects progressing?" Linda Cross was working at a scientific station that had been added to the bridge specifically for her use. She had spent the past 3 years developing new forms of biological warfare that could target specific alien species while leaving others unharmed. "Very well, Captain," Cross replied without looking up from her work. "The virus I created for the Vorthak has mutated in interesting ways. It's now capable of affecting 17 different species, and the effects are even more creative than I originally planned." Morrison walked to the main viewing screen and looked down at the planet below. Zarian Prime had been one of the most advanced worlds in the galaxy before the humans arrived. Now it was a testing ground for techniques that made the original Vorthak. Methods seemed gentle by comparison. "Sir," Lieutenant Garcia said quietly, moving closer to Morrison, "may I speak with you privately?" Morrison gestured for her to continue. "Sir, this isn't what we signed up for," Garcia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When we started Project Pandora, it was supposed to be about defending Earth, about stopping the Vorthak. But this ... this is something else entirely." Morrison looked at her with eyes that had grown cold over the past 3 years. "Lieutenant, the Vorthak taught us an important lesson. In this galaxy there are only predators and prey. We can either be the monsters or we can be the victims." But sir, we're not defending ourselves anymore," Garcia said. "We're conquering, we're enslaving entire civilizations. We're doing things that are worse than anything the Vorthak ever did." Frank Butler overheard the conversation and joined them. His work in psychological manipulation had evolved far beyond what he had done in the early days of the project. "Lieutenant Garcia," Butler said, with a smile that made her skin crawl, "you're thinking about this the wrong way. We're not conquering these species, we're educating them. We're teaching them their proper place in the galaxy." He activated a display showing the current status of human expansion. Red zones marked systems under direct human control. Yellow zones showed species that had surrendered without resistance. Green zones indicated civilizations that were still deciding whether to submit or face the consequences. "Every species in this galaxy needs to understand one simple truth," Butler continued. "Humans are the apex predators now. The sooner they accept that, the better things will be for everyone." Garcia looked around the bridge at the Project Pandora volunteers. They were all smiling, all happy with their work. But there was something wrong with their joy, something that reminded her why these people had been locked away in maximum security prisons. "What happens when there's no one left to conquer?" Garcia asked. "What happens when every species in the galaxy has surrendered to us?" Sally Kim overheard the question and laughed with genuine delight. "Oh, Lieutenant, that's the beautiful part. The galaxy is so much bigger than we originally thought. Our scouts have already made contact with 3 other galactic civilizations. Each one has hundreds of species we haven't studied yet." She pulled up star charts showing vast regions of space beyond the local galaxy cluster. "And after we finish with them, there are always more galaxies to explore. The universe is full of interesting subjects for our research." Morrison walked back to his command chair. Through the view screen, he could see shuttles launching from his fleet toward the planet below. Each shuttle carried Project Pandora volunteers who were eager to continue their work with the remaining Vorthix survivors. "Sir," Garcia said one last time, "Admiral Kane started this project to save humanity, but what have we become? Are we even human anymore?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Below them, the shuttles reached the planet's surface and began their work. The few Vorthak life signs on their sensors began to flicker and change as the volunteers applied techniques they had perfected over 3 years of practice. "Lieutenant," Morrison finally said, "Admiral Kane was right about one thing. The Vorthak came here with hell, and we answered with something darker. But he was wrong about being able to control it." He turned to face Garcia directly. "We're not human anymore, Lieutenant. We're something new. Something that makes the old human civilization look as innocent as children playing games." Garcia felt a chill run down her spine. "And what happens to people like me? People who still remember what we used to be?" Sally Kim answered before Morrison could speak. "Oh, don't worry, Lieutenant. We have some wonderful new techniques for helping people adapt to our new reality. You'll find them very educational." Garcia backed away from the command area, suddenly realizing that she was no longer safe among her own species. The Project Pandora volunteers were looking at her with the same expression they had once reserved for alien prisoners. "Sir, I request permission to transfer to another ship," Garcia said. Her voice shaking, Morrison smiled. And it was the same cold expression that had once belonged only to the worst criminals in human space. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Lieutenant. You see, we can't have anyone spreading stories about our methods. It might give other species ideas about resistance." Frank Butler moved closer to Garcia. "Don't worry, Lieutenant. We'll take very good care of you. We've learned so much about human psychology over the past 3 years. You're going to help us learn even more." As Garcia was led away by security personnel who no longer looked quite human themselves, Morrison turned back to the view screen. The galaxy spread out before them. Full of worlds to explore and species to study, the Vorthak had brought hell to humanity's doorstep, expecting to find another helpless species to add to their collection. Instead, they had awakened something that made their own empire of cruelty seem almost benevolent by comparison. Now the galaxy belonged to humanity's monsters, and they were just getting started. The universe was vast and full of interesting subjects for their research, and they had all the time in the world to perfect their art. The war was over, but the real nightmare had just begun.